Friends, in today's video, we are going to discuss King Lear, one of the greatest tragedies written by William Shakespeare, believed to have been composed around 1605 to 1606 and first performed on St. Stephen's Day, December 26, 1606. It was first published in 1608 as a quarto edition and later appeared in the 1623 First Folio with some differences in text. The play is set in ancient Britain and is thought to be inspired by the legend of Lear of Britain, a mythical king recorded in historical chronicles such as Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britanniae. Written during the early years of King James I's reign, it reflects the political anxieties of the time, especially concerns about monarchy, succession, and the chaos that follows when order collapses. Combining themes of loyalty, betrayal, power, madness, and family conflict, King Lear remains one of Shakespeare's most intense explorations of human nature. As King Lear is one of the complicated play by William Shakespeare, let's discuss about its characters first, so that it would be easy to understand the play clearly. Our first character is King Lear, the aging king of Britain, who is proud, impulsive, and easily deceived by flattery. He loses his kingdom and dignity before learning the value of true loyalty and love. Goneril, Lear's eldest daughter, who is manipulative, power-hungry, and cruel. She is married to the Duke of Albany, but secretly has an affair with Edmund. Regan, Lear's middle daughter, who is just as ruthless as her sister Goneril. She is married to the Duke of Cornwall and supports brutal acts, including the blinding of Gloucester. Cordelia, Lear's youngest daughter, who is honest, virtuous, and loyal. She is banished for refusing to flatter her father, but later returns with an army to save him. King of France, a noble and honorable ruler who comes to Britain seeking Cordelia's hand in marriage. When Lear disowns her for refusing to flatter him, France chooses to marry her without a dowry, valuing her honesty and virtue above wealth or power. He later leads the French army to support Cordelia in rescuing Lear. Kent, a nobleman deeply loyal to Lear. After being banished for defending Cordelia, he disguises himself as a servant named Caius to protect the king. Gloucester, a nobleman loyal to Lear, who is deceived by his illegitimate son Edmund into turning against his loyal son Edgar. He is blinded before finally learning the truth. Edgar, Gloucester's legitimate son, who is wrongfully accused by Edmund of plotting against his father. He disguises himself as a mad beggar named Poor Tom to survive and later helps his father. Edmund, Gloucester's illegitimate son, who is cunning, ambitious, and treacherous. He betrays both his father and brother while allying himself with Goneril and Regan for power. Albany, the Duke of Albany and husband of Goneril. At first he is passive, but later he opposes his wife's cruelty and works to restore justice. Cornwall, the Duke of Cornwall and husband of Regan. He is authoritarian and violent, playing a key role in the brutal blinding of Gloucester before being killed. Oswald, Goneril's steward, who is arrogant and loyal to her schemes. He carries her messages and assists in her plots. The story begins in ancient Britain at the royal court of King Lear. Lear is an old king, tired from ruling for many years. He has 3 daughters, Goneril, the eldest, Regan, the middle one, and Cordelia, the youngest and his favorite. Lear decides it's time to divide his kingdom among his daughters so he can retire from ruling, but he wants to make the decision in a dramatic way. He announces that each daughter will tell him how much she loves him, and the one who speaks most beautifully will get the biggest share of land. First, Goneril speaks. She says that her love for him is greater than words can describe, that she values him above her own freedom, and that she loves him more than her own life. Lear is pleased and gives her a large part of the kingdom. Next, Regan speaks. She tries to outdo Goneril. She says her love is even greater than Goneril's, and that she cannot imagine any joy except serving her father. Lear is delighted and gives her an equal share of land. Finally, it is Cordelia's turn. Everyone expects her to win because she has always been Lear's favorite. But when Lear asks her to speak, Cordelia simply says, nothing. Lear is shocked. He asks her again, and she explains that she loves him as a daughter should love her father, but no more than that. She says that when she marries, she will also give love to her husband, so she cannot promise all her love to her father alone. Lear takes this as an insult. Furious and humiliated, he disowns Cordelia completely. He says she is no longer his daughter and gives her share of the kingdom to Goneril and Regan. The Earl of Kent, one of Lear's most loyal nobles, steps forward and begs Lear to reconsider. Kent warns him that Goneril and Regan are flattering him for their own gain and that Cordelia is the only one speaking honestly. Lear refuses to listen. In his anger, he banishes Kent from the kingdom. Kent accepts the punishment but promises to return in disguise to keep serving the king. Cordelia is now without a dowry, but the King of France still wishes to marry her. He values her honesty and says she is richer in virtue than her sisters are in land. The Duke of Burgundy, who is also interested in marrying her, refuses once she has no property. Cordelia leaves with the King of France, warning her sisters to take good care of their father, though she doubts they will. As soon as Cordelia is gone, Goneril and Regan privately discuss how old and foolish Lear has become. They agree that they will need to manage him carefully now that he is no longer king in power, only in title. Meanwhile, another subplot begins in the household of Gloucester, a nobleman loyal to Lear. Gloucester has two sons, Edgar, his legitimate heir, and Edmund, his illegitimate son. Edmund is bitter about his status as a bastard and resents being treated as second class. He secretly plots to get rid of Edgar and take his inheritance. He forges a letter, pretending it is from Edgar, suggesting that Edgar wants to kill their father to get his wealth sooner. When Gloucester sees the letter, he is shocked and begins to suspect Edgar. Back to Lear. He is now living with Goneril. He brought with him 100 knights to serve as his personal attendants. Lear expects to be treated like a king, even though he has given away his power. But Goneril quickly grows tired of his demands and the noisy, rowdy behavior of his knights. She tells her servant, Oswald, to be disrespectful toward Lear, hoping it will make him leave. Lear notices that Oswald and the other servants are ignoring him and treating him rudely. He becomes angry and strikes Oswald. Goneril then openly confronts her father. She accuses him of being disruptive and says his knights are disorderly and too numerous. She demands that he reduce their number. Lear is furious. He curses Goneril, saying he hopes she will have a thankless child just as she has been thankless to him. He announces that he will go live with Regan instead, expecting her to treat him better. In his rage, he leaves Goneril's house immediately. After Lear leaves, Goneril sends a letter to Regan warning her about Lear's temper and telling her to be firm with him. On his way to Regan's home, Lear meets a mysterious servant who offers his help. This is actually Kent, now in disguise, keeping his promise to serve the king. Lear does not recognize him, but accepts him into his service. At Gloucester's house, Edmund continues his plan. He tells Edgar that Gloucester is angry and warns him to flee for his life. Edgar, confused and scared, runs away. Then Edmund wounds himself and pretends that Edgar attacked him. Gloucester, finding Edmund injured, believes the lie completely and declares Edgar an outlaw. When Lear arrives at Regan's home, he finds she is not there. She has gone to stay with her husband, the Duke of Cornwall, at Gloucester's castle. Lear sends a messenger to announce his arrival. This messenger is Oswald, Goneril's servant, which already puts Lear in a bad mood. Kent, now serving as Lear's disguised attendant, meets Oswald on the road. He hates Oswald for his rudeness to the king and picks a fight with him. The quarrel becomes so intense that the Duke of Cornwall has Kent put in the stocks as punishment. This is a deep insult, and Kent is now a servant of the king, and putting him in stocks shows disrespect to Lear himself. When Lear arrives and sees Kent in the stocks, he is outraged, but Regan and Cornwall refuse to release him. Regan then delivers news that shocks Lear. She says she agrees with Goneril's complaints and thinks Lear should live with only a small number of attendants. She even suggests he should go back to Goneril and ask for forgiveness. Lear refuses, insisting he will never return to her. In the middle of this tense conversation, Goneril herself arrives. Now both sisters stand together against Lear. They tell him he does not need any attendants at all if he stays with them. Lear cannot believe what he is hearing. The daughters to whom he gave everything are now taking away his dignity. Feeling betrayed and powerless, Lear leaves the castle in a storm of anger and heartbreak. A wild storm raged across the countryside. The wind howled, rain poured, and thunder shook the sky. Out in this violent weather, King Lear wandered with only his fool and the disguised Kent for company. Lear was soaked to the skin, but the storm outside felt like nothing compared to the storm inside his heart. He was furious, humiliated, and heartbroken over how Goneril and Regan had treated him. The fool tried to cheer him with jokes, but Lear barely heard him. He shouted at the storm as if it were a living enemy, daring the thunder and lightning to strike harder. He called himself a man more sinned against than sinning, meaning he had suffered more wrongs than he had committed. Kent urged him to take shelter, but Lear refused. He said the storm was kinder than his ungrateful daughters. Eventually, though, Kent persuaded him to come to a small nearby hut. Before going in, Lear paused and began to think about the poor and homeless people of his kingdom, realizing how little he had cared for them when he was king. It was one of his first moments of self-awareness. Inside the hut, they found another figure, a half-naked madman calling himself Poor Tom. This was actually Edgar, still hiding in disguise after Edmund had framed him. Edgar was pretending to be a crazed beggar tormented by evil spirits. Lear, fascinated by Poor Tom's madness, began speaking to him as if he were a philosopher. Lear's own mind was starting to unravel, and he even began tearing off his clothes to be more like Poor Tom. Meanwhile, at Gloucester's castle, Gloucester was troubled. He had been loyal to Lear all his life, but now Cornwall and Regan were openly against the king. He overheard that they planned to close the castle gates to keep Lear out in the storm. Disturbed by their cruelty, Gloucester secretly told Edmund that he could not stand by and watch the king suffer. He decided to help Lear and sent Edmund to tell Cornwall that he was going to assist the king. But Gloucester had made a terrible mistake. Edmund was not loyal to him. As soon as Gloucester left, Edmund went to Cornwall and Regan and revealed Gloucester's plan. He told them Gloucester had been in contact with the King of France through Cordelia and was plotting against them. Cornwall and Regan were furious. They declared Gloucester a traitor and promised to reward Edmund for his betrayal, naming him the new Earl of Gloucester. Back in the hut, Lear's mind became more chaotic. He imagined putting his daughters on trial for their crimes against him, appointing the fool and Poor Tom as judges. The trial turned into nonsense as Lear ranted about injustice, greed, and hypocrisy. Kent saw that the king desperately needed rest, so he found a nearby barn and led Lear inside to sleep. Gloucester arrived and told Kent that there was a plan to take Lear to Dover, where Cordelia's army from France had landed. There, Lear could be safe and perhaps restored to power. Kent agreed and prepared to take the king away secretly. But before this could happen, Gloucester was captured by Cornwall, Regan, and their servants. They accused him of treason for helping the king and sending him toward the French forces. Regan questioned him sharply, but Gloucester defiantly said he would rather serve Lear than them. As punishment, they decided to blind him. Their servants tied him to a chair, and Cornwall cruelly gouged out one of Gloucester's eyes. Regan encouraged him to finish the job. One of Cornwall's own servants, horrified by the cruelty, drew his sword to stop Cornwall. They fought, and the servant wounded Cornwall before Regan killed the servant. Despite his injury, Cornwall removed Gloucester's other eye. Blind and in agony, Gloucester cried out for his son Edmund to help him, but Regan told him the awful truth. It was Edmund who had betrayed him. Gloucester finally realized he had misjudged both his sons, casting out the loyal Edgar and trusting the treacherous Edmund. Broken and helpless, he was thrown out of the castle to wander in the night. Outside, Gloucester met a peasant who guided him toward Dover. Gloucester wanted to die, but the peasant refused to leave him. Soon, they encountered Poor Tom, and Gloucester asked the supposed beggar to lead him to the cliffs of Dover so he could throw himself into the sea. Edgar, heartbroken at his father's condition, agreed to guide him, but secretly planned to save him. While Gloucester wandered blind, Regan began thinking about her own power. With Cornwall wounded from the fight with his servant, she started to act independently. She suspected Goneril might try to take Edmund for herself, so she hinted to Oswald, Goneril's servant, that he should report everything he saw to her instead. She even suggested she might want Edmund as a husband if Cornwall died. At the same time, Goneril was growing impatient with her husband, the Duke of Albany. Albany was horrified by her cruelty to Lear and told her so, but she dismissed him as weak and cowardly. Secretly, she sent Oswald with a letter to Edmund, suggesting they form a romantic and political alliance. Meanwhile, Kent finally brought Lear to Dover. Cordelia had arrived with the French army, but she was not focused on conquest. She only wanted to rescue her father and restore his dignity. She heard from a gentleman how Lear had been wandering the fields, singing to flowers and wearing weeds on his head. She was moved to tears and prayed for him to recover his sanity. The French army began preparing for battle against the forces of Goneril, Regan, and Edmund. At the same time, poor Tom led Gloucester to what he claimed was the edge of the cliffs at Dover, but in reality, it was just flat ground. Gloucester thanked him for bringing him there and said he was ready to jump. Edgar stepped aside, and Gloucester fell safely. Edgar then told him he must have been saved by the gods, and Gloucester decided to live on, continuing toward Dover with poor Tom as his guide. In Dover, Cordelia prepared for the coming battle. She had returned from France not to conquer England, but to save her father. She sent out scouts to search for him, and at last, Lear was found wandering in the fields, wearing flowers and weeds in his hair and speaking to himself. His mind was still unsettled, but he was calmer now. Cordelia's heart ached when she saw him. She had a doctor care for him, and when Lear awoke, he thought he was dreaming. He asked if he was in heaven and begged Cordelia to forgive him for the wrong he had done her. Cordelia said there was nothing to forgive, and they were joyfully reunited. Meanwhile, the conflict between Goneril and Regan grew sharper. Both sisters desired Edmund, and each wanted to secure him as an ally. Goneril's husband, the Duke of Albany, still disapproved of the sisters' cruelty and secretly leaned toward supporting Lear. Regan suspected that Goneril was a danger to her and began openly competing for Edmund's attention. Goneril, worried that Albany might interfere with her plans, hinted to Edmund that she might have to remove her husband if he got in the way. Gloucester was still traveling with Edgar, who remained in disguise as poor Tom. Gloucester believed he was being led to Dover simply to escape danger, but Edgar knew that his father was near despair. As they walked, they met a knight who was searching for Lear's army. Edgar learned from the knight that the English forces, led by Albany, Regan, and Edmund, were marching to meet the French army. The knight also revealed that there was a secret rivalry between Goneril and Regan over Edmund, and that Goneril might be plotting against her husband. In the English camp, Regan questioned Oswald, Goneril's servant, trying to find out whether Goneril was involved with Edmund. Regan hinted that she herself wanted to marry Edmund now that Cornwall was dead from the wound he had received during Gloucester's blinding. She tried to persuade Oswald to side with her, but Oswald remained loyal to Goneril. Carrying Goneril's letter for Edmund, Oswald set off toward Dover. On the way, Oswald encountered Gloucester and Edgar. Gloucester, blind and defenseless, was quickly attacked by Oswald, who hoped to kill him and gain a reward from Goneril. Edgar stepped in to protect his father and killed Oswald. Searching Oswald's body, Edgar found Goneril's letter to Edmund. The letter revealed her love for Edmund and her plan to murder Albany so that she and Edmund could rule together. Edgar kept the letter as evidence, deciding it would be useful later. As the battle approached, Albany confronted Goneril about her behavior and the cruelty she and Regan had shown Lear. Goneril brushed off his accusations. Albany did not yet know the full extent of her betrayal, but suspicion was growing. Edmund, in the meantime, was quietly making his own plans. He promised his love to both Goneril and Regan, playing them against each other, but in truth he cared only for his own advancement. He secretly ordered that if the English army won, Lear and Cordelia should be captured and quietly executed to prevent them from becoming a threat. The French and English armies finally met in battle. The English forces, led by Albany, Regan, Goneril, and Edmund, defeated the French. Cordelia and Lear were captured and taken prisoner. Edmund instructed his officers to take them away and make sure they did not live long enough to be rescued. He ordered that it should look like an accident or suicide. After the battle, Albany turned against Edmund. He accused him of treachery, producing the letter from Goneril that Edgar had found. Albany demanded that Edmund answer these charges in single combat. A masked champion stepped forward. It was Edgar, now in armor. The two fought fiercely, and Edmund was mortally wounded. Albany ordered the mask removed, and everyone saw that the challenger was Edgar. He told the whole story of how Edmund had betrayed their father and how Gloucester had died shortly before. his heart breaking from the joy and shock of recognizing Edgar and the sorrow of all that had happened. News arrived that Regan had suddenly collapsed and died. It was revealed that Goneril had poisoned her to remove her rival for Edmund's love. Moments later, word came that Goneril had killed herself, unable to face the disgrace that was coming. Edmund, now dying, tried to redeem himself slightly by confessing his order to kill Lear and Cordelia. He sent a messenger to stop the execution, but it was too late. Lear entered carrying Cordelia's body in his arms. She had been hanged in her cell, and the soldier who was supposed to kill her had also died in the attempt. Lear said he had killed the man, but Cordelia was already gone. In his grief, Lear begged for a sign of life from her, thinking he saw her lips move, but she was dead. Heartbroken, he cried out in despair and soon died beside her. With the royal family destroyed, Albany turned to Edgar and Kent, offering them power to help rebuild the kingdom. Kent, weary from all the suffering he had witnessed, hinted that he would soon follow his master Lear into death. Edgar was left to speak the play's final words, reflecting on the sorrow they had endured and the lessons learned about pride, loyalty, and human weakness. The tragedy was complete. Lear, Cordelia, Goneril, Regan, Gloucester, and Edmund were all dead, and the kingdom lay in the hands of the few survivors who could only mourn what had been lost.